Hi, I'm Paul Hutcheon, the political editor of the Daily Record, and welcome to another Daily Record live stream. The occasion is that we have a new Tory party leader at long last, after what felt like probably the longest leadership contest in the history of politics. Liz Truss is the new Tory leader, beating Rishi Sunak quite comfortably. She's going to be the next Prime Minister, and that will all be finalised tomorrow. And then it'll be Truss versus Starmer, hopefully at Prime Minister's question time. So joining me to basically analyse this momentous piece of news is Torcuil Crichton, our man at Westminster, and also the deputy political editor of the Daily Record, Chris McCall. Now, starting with you, Torcuil, I don't want to dwell too much on the contest. There's been so much spoken about it and written about it. In the end, Truss won comfortably, 57% to, I think, 43%. I want to focus just on the challenges facing Prime Minister Truss, which is how she'll be described from tomorrow onwards. Do you think it's fair to say that she'll be the first Prime Minister since Thatcher to become PM and immediately inherit a crisis?
Well, I guess things looked worse when Churchill took over as Prime Minister when the Nazis marched into Norway. But in modern times, you've barely had a leader take over at such a time of crisis. It is a national emergency. We are, by proxy, at war with Russia. That's why your energy bills are going through the roof. The economy is teetering on the brink of recession. And as, of course, the union itself is far from looking frayed at the edges with the Brexit deal affecting Northern Ireland. Of course, continued calls for a second independence referendum in Scotland. So it's a bulging in tray. Now, Paul, you said she won comfortably. I don't think she won comfortably at all. They were predicting this was going to be a walkover, a 70-30. And Boris Johnson, when he won the last time, he was well over 60%. She's under the 60% barrier, 57%. Remember, she went into this election with more MPs supporting Rishi Sunak than her. So more of the parliamentary party didn't think she should be leader. And she hasn't convinced 2/3 or even 60% of the Tory membership. So how is she going to convince the country? So she, on top of every other challenge she faces immediate demands to go to the country and give herself a mandate, get a personal mandate, and give this government some legitimacy.
Chris, just on the point that Torcuil made there about the general election, there's been some speculation that the Tories might want a snap poll, but she was quite clear in her comments that she saw the next general election being in 2024. What did you make of that?
Yeah, she was very clear in her speech. She said that she would lead the Conservatives to a handsome victory in 2024. And, I mean, we'll have to take her at her word for just now. I mean, as Torcuil touched upon, the political landscape could scarcely be any worse for her and her party right now. And let's face it, things could get even worse. We might not even have reached the low point in terms of how high energy could go, the recession that could weaken an already struggling economy. Things could, conceivably be in a much, much worse place very, very quickly. So for those reasons, maybe Liz Truss and her team will be thinking, we've got to play for time here. The party has a mandate, not won by Liz Truss, but has a mandate, and it could hold on as far as January 2025. I mean, I think that's unlikely. I think we have to go with 2024 for the next general election. But as any new Tory leader that comes in, with Boris Johnson before, Theresa May before that, when they've come in as Prime Ministers after being elected by only a small number of Conservative Party members there are across the UK, it's very easy for the political opponents to just say over and over again, when are you going to go to the country? You don't have a mandate. And Liz Truss is going to be hearing that again and again in the coming days.
Torcuil, let's talk about this crisis that she's going to inherit and face as soon as she enters Downing Street. The energy bills and the fact that ordinary people are going to face increases of around 80% from October onwards. Now, during the contest, she was very reticent about what she was going to do to address this challenge head on. Instead, she focused on things like a national insurance cut, scrapping the green energy levy, which, let's face it, aren't going to touch the sides when it comes to energy bills of around £3,500 a year. But now, just as she's won, and probably in the last 48 hours as well, we've heard suggestions that she's looking at this Labour policy of effectively cancelling the rise in October, or basically reducing energy bills. Are you surprised about that? What do you make of it?
Well, she has. Let's be straight, but she's completely flip-flopped. She's gone from no handouts, which was her campaign message, to hand up, which is a Monday morning message from Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, who by tomorrow night will be Chancellor. And that looks like it might be £100 billion deal. It's the Labour answer with rocket boosters on it, because Labour were looking at 29 billion to get us through the next 6 months. This looks like 100 billion to freeze consumer bills, to get grants and loans out the door to small businesses that are facing huge energy costs and are going to the wall in this forthcoming recession. So she's going to do that very, very quickly. It would be a news story, a huge news story, if she didn't do anything about it or hadn't signalled that she was going to change tack on that. But that might be a strength of Liz Truss. You know, Liz Truss is ideological. We saw that yesterday with her answer to Laura Kuenssberg on taxes. She thinks cutting taxes and the rich gaining more from tax cuts is fair. She says redistribution hasn't worked, i.e. a policy of moving money from rich companies or from the richest in society to the poorest to help them out in education, social equality and everything else. She says that doesn't work. So the best way is to cut taxes and let the economy grow. So she's deeply ideological, but she's shown she can move. She's shown she can be nimble. So I wouldn't underestimate Liz Truss. I mean, if she can move quickly, if she can pivot quickly on this, get a bounce out of being Prime Minister, being new, being different, burying Boris Johnson, hopefully, for her and for the Tory party. And then she get a big bounce from delivering a huge amount of money, pandemic levels of support for society, then she might be in good shape to get through this winter and get in shape for a 2024 or 2023 or whenever she wants to call a general election.
Chris, the more I think about it, I tweet about this, I'd be surprised if she didn't go for this Labour policy, albeit on a more ambitious scale, maybe applying to 12 months rather than 6. Because if you think about it, if you simply targeted the support at the most needy through things like universal credit or increasing the level of benefits, then people on middle incomes are not going to receive anything. And if that was the case, and those people in middle incomes were paying energy costs at around 80% more than they currently are, the Tories would just lose their core vote. They would just lose shed loads of votes. So I think that it's inevitable that whatever they propose is going to be broad-based rather than targeted at the poor. Do you think that this is maybe about self-preservation for Truss, that she realises that if she doesn't go down this road, that anything else she does in her premiership will mean that she's doomed?
I think that's absolutely right. I think Liz Truss and her team realise that they have to do something, and they have to do something big, particularly over the winter that is coming. You know, they can't stand back and not help people, because this isn't just a small section of society. This is everybody that's facing terrifying fuel bills. However, I mean, like all these decisions, there's going to be some political blowback from people in her own party. For example, Torcuil touched upon there about the fact that she's already seemed to be flip-flopping on this big issue of handouts. She went through her leadership campaign saying, or suggesting at least, that there wouldn't be any, and now there could be some pretty big ones coming down the line. And not everybody on the Tory backbenches, for example, and some right-wing economists necessarily think this is a good thing. There are very real fears that inflation, which is already running at 10%, could rise as high as 13% in the coming weeks, could get even worse as a result of these handouts. Now, inflation obviously affects everybody. So Liz Truss, she faces some pretty bleak political decisions in the coming weeks. On the one hand, she has to try and keep energy bills down. She's also going to have to try and steer an economy that's teetering on the brink of recession. And she's also somehow, which is very, very difficult for a single government to do, especially given the war in Europe, She also has to try and find a way to try to bring recession back down to manageable levels. Can she do all these three things at once? I certainly wouldn't want to try it myself, and it's a pretty damn difficult job, but it's now hers and she's got to get on with it.
Torcuil, the Conservatives have long styled themselves as the party of sound money, that we may not be likeable people, but we're responsible when it comes to the public finances. And yet you look at what Liz Truss might be doing here, a massive government intervention to freeze energy bills, and yet also cutting taxes at the same time through borrowing billions of pounds more. How on earth is she going to make the balance, the books balance in this endeavour?
The answer to that is she's not. It's a double whammy of loans, and she's going to have to take out massive loans to get us through the winter and to keep businesses above water in this energy crisis. And then she also proposes to reverse the national insurance tax rise that Rishi Sunak brought in and lower taxes. And she's pledged not to raise any taxes during the rest of this parliament. So she's got to borrow that as well. Now, that goes against Treasury orthodoxy. Now, Liz Truss has been Chief Secretary of the Treasury. She's worked in there. She knows what it's like. She's presented herself as a change candidate and a radical candidate by kicking that dog and saying, that's economic managerialism, as she describes it, has to be overturned. That orthodoxy has to be overturned, and we need to get radical and shake the economy into growth. Now, that puts the fear of God into quite a lot of number of people in the Treasury and quite a lot of people at the height of at senior levels in the Tory party, including the previous Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who said it would be a disaster. Now, it's an experiment. Will the Treasury, will her team kind of allow her to do it? Kwasi Kwarteng, a close friend of hers, former university colleague, they came up through the party ranks together. He looks like he'll be Chancellor tomorrow. He's game for it, taking these massive loans. Now, remember, this winter, if your bills are frozen, it won't be for free. You're going to have to pay. I'm going to have to pay. We're all going to have to pay for it sometime in future. Now, whether that's by higher taxes under Liz Truss, doubtful. A windfall tax on oil companies under Liz Truss, doubtful. Or a surcharge on future bills for decades to come, which will hit, Paul, your middle classes as well as your working classes. That might be the answer that she's looking for. But one way or another, to get through this winter, we're all going to have to pay.
It sounds like she's trying to buy the next general election by putting it on the country's
The never. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, let's talk about the two main opposition parties, Labour and the SNP. Labour, first of all. Now, they came up with this idea of the energy free pot. What do you think Labour will be thinking about Truss's victory and the fact that within weeks she might be pinching their flagship policy?
Well, I think the point that Torcuil made earlier about the bounce that all new prime ministers get, Labour will be worried about that in the short term because Liz Truss, to many people, she is a new face. I mean, if you don't follow politics day to day, you might not know who Liz Truss is that well. You might be familiar roughly with who she is. But for a lot of people, they'll give her the chance. They'll let her set her stall out and get to know the country. So you might see some boost in the polls for the Conservatives, and some people might get quite excited about that. I think Labour really will be sitting there thinking, as we've talked about already, they know that this winter period that's coming could be very, very bad in terms of what the country faces. And, they really have to offer the big ideas. I mean, as we've discussed, they've offered around £29 billion worth of an emergency plan to try and tackle rising fuel bills. Liz Truss could, as Torcuil said, boost it even further to £100 billion. But that's only, as we said, only one of the problems facing. So Labour needs to offer some big ideas. They can't just say, we're not the Conservatives. That's enough of a reason to vote for us. In times like these, we need big plans, we need big ideas, we need positive visions for the country. That's something that Liz Truss talked a lot about during her campaign when she was speaking to Tory party members, and other members of the public might relate to that. In times like these, they want some positive messages, even if they don't necessarily translate into hard political action. So Labour has to offer something positive as well as, facing the bleak reality of the UK economy. In terms of the SNP, I mean, really, this is business as usual. They'll be saying this is another unelected leader in London who doesn't have a mandate in Scotland, who is blocking, Scotland's right to have a referendum on its future. So the SNP will be carrying on. They'll be saying, look, we have a mandate for India F2. Liz Truss is saying no to that. And the question is, where do they go from here? But I think the SNP, they won't be particularly worried, I don't think, about the prospect of a Truss premiership. They've got their eyes fixed on the prize, which is the India F2, and the Supreme Court battle, which is coming up next month. Another problem, another potential issue that Liz Truss faces. Of course, most people think the UK government will probably prevail in that, clearing that hurdle, but there are many, many more to come in the big constitutional race, of course.
Torcuil, in terms of the SNP, do you think it's fair that a Liz Truss premiership will probably strengthen the SNP electorally, but not move it forward in terms of them getting India F2?
Well, the SNP, of course, today have lost one of their major assets on the battlefield, Boris Johnson, the Etonian bogeyman on whom they could blame everything going wrong and present a case for Scotland to break away from what they saw as a kind of rotten Westminster system. So the SNP are one back on that, perhaps, and Liz Truss has made herself very hard ideologically against a second referendum and against independence. And the SNP have to watch, and Labour have to watch this too. I mean, Liz Truss won this, remember? Okay, 57%. We should acknowledge she's the Prime Minister of Britain. Not many people get to be that. She has succeeded. She succeeded with simple messaging. No new taxes. Yes to grammar schools. No to independence. She kept her message quite simple and got that message through. Now, Labour will come up with a 10-point plan on the economy, but a 10-point plan doesn't beat, 5 one-second sound bites when it comes to kind of getting voters' attention. So, yes, Chris, Labour have to come up with big ideas. Labour's leader, Keir Starmer, hasn't sold himself to the electorate yet. We don't know if he will now, as an attractive enough alternative. So Labour need that kind of reservoir dogs approach of, they've got a good team, Labour, so they need them all on the field, and they need all the big ideas. The SNP, well, I don't know if Nicola Sturgeon has boxed clever or boxed herself in with this demand for a 2023 referendum. We'll see how that plays out. But there is the drama of the Supreme Court, a legalistic drama in the next month, which will give the SNP another platform to declare that Westminster, or the new Prime Minister, is being anti-democratic by going against the majority of the Scottish Parliament for a second independence referendum. Where that leaves Nicola Sturgeon in 2023, when, as we all think, there won't be a referendum, or certainly one that's set up on a legal basis, I don't know. But I say today the SNP lost a good ally in Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson, well, he didn't push the dial over 50% or much over 50 for the SNP. He was a handy hook on which to hang every grievance, and they might find that a little bit more difficult with Liz Truss.
Yeah, we're sticking with India F2. I mean, obviously, the Scottish Government want a second referendum in October next year. The Conservative government has said no to that. And so the Lord Advocate has made a referral to the Supreme Court. That will be heard in October. Many legal commentators expect the referral to fail and that it will be declared out with the powers of the Parliament. If that happens, isn't India F2 essentially going to be put into cold storage for a couple of years? Because Plan C is then to make the next general election, which could be in 2024, a de facto referendum on this issue.
Yes. And Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP, will keep the ball in the air until 2024 on that issue. That they're very good at doing that. But Nicola Sturgeon, remember, has her own problems. A government that's long in the tooth, same as the Tory government here at Westminster. A government that's seen as being increasingly less competent in delivering, whether that be on ferries or on schools or on much else besides diesel. Phasing out diesel buses today is another SNP promise that has gone by the wayside. So she'll be going into 2024 election on an agenda of independence, whereas some voters may be looking at the SNP as a faded government and passing judgment on them on Scottish issues at the same time. And if she makes it an effective referendum, vote for us for independence, then that invites a coalition of anti-independence voters in constituencies to come together in that binary way and coalesce behind the person most likely to defeat, whether that be Labour or Tory or Lib. That's what we see happens in these seats where Tories win through, and it happens in Edinburgh South where Ian Murray wins through. You get this coalition, this alliance of anti-independence voters coming together to defeat the SNP. So the SNP are sitting very comfortably in the high 40s and 50s percentage, but if they can't go higher, then there's only one other way they can go, and that's down. So notably today, the SNP haven't called for an immediate general election, and as Sarwar has, he's chomping at the bit. The STUC have. They want to peg this Tory government in, but the SNP haven't today, interestingly enough, called for that early general election.
Just a very quick final one. There's a bookmakers offering odds of 4-1 on Liz Truss leaving her post next year. Chris, you fancy a flutter on that?
No, my record in political betting is less than stellar, so I think I'll pass on that opportunity. Not to repeat myself too much, but again, Liz Truss, she does face an incredibly difficult start to her time as Prime Minister. Many, many serious political pitfalls that she'll have to avoid. But as Torcuil has said, she has proved to be light on her feet in the past, stepping past these things. So maybe she can do it again. And as she suggested in her speech today, get to a general election in 2024. I don't want to make a prediction on what kind of, state things will be in by then. I think we all have to hope they'll be considerably better than now. Lower fuel bills would be a start. But I think Liz Truss will think, she's got a difficult start, but she'll be confident that she can get to an election. And whether, what kind of state the country's in, we don't know. We don't know how well Labour will continue. Will their poll lead continue? Can they increase that poll lead? Many people have suggested that Labour should be out of sight in the polls, given the difficulties the Conservatives have faced in recent years, but they aren't. And, we could see a Liz Truss bounce. So lots to play for.
Look, I think that pretty much wraps it up. It's going to be a momentous week in UK and Scottish politics. As I said earlier, Liz Truss will become Prime Minister tomorrow. We're also getting the Scottish Government's programme for government, which is the legislative plan session. And we've also got an important statement from Acting Finance Secretary John Stoney on Wednesday about some of the financial challenges facing the Scottish Government. So we may have another live stream later on this week. If you want to follow the Daily Record on Twitter, please do so on @record_politics. We've also got a Facebook group as well. So I hope you enjoyed our analysis this afternoon, and I hope to see you very soon.